Hello, friends. So today we're going to make this corset top I found off Etsy. And I was really excited by the structure of this. I had seen a couple fast fashion brands do a similar style, but I didn't really want to purchase from fast fashion brands simply because one, the quality isn't high enough that it'll last very long. And two, they tend to be made out of stretch fabric, which is great in terms of comfortability. But when it comes to like more lasting and just like the overall feel of something, I tend to prefer woven fabric with like elastic bands to make it more comfortable rather than actual stretchy fabric. So I went out to a local thrift shop and I found some cool tapestry fabric that I thought would work really well for this project. This is my first time trying this pattern. People will be a little, you know, judgmental of me not doing a mock-up, but I sew a decent amount, or I have been sewing for the last couple of years. So I kind of know what size I am. And in general, I'm not as worried when I'm using something like thrifted fabric and one where I have so much of it, because if it comes out too small or too large, I can always gift it to someone who is, smaller or larger than me. And then I get the enjoyment of giving gifts, which is one of my favorite things to do. So I wasn't too worried about it with something that uses this small of amount of fabric and materials and time. I really like the concept to have it mapped out in my head. So today, you guys will get to watch me go through many days of process and sewing. And the reason it took me more than just a day to sew this is I was doing it during the week and when I had time. So it definitely is a project you could do in probably a day or two, like on a weekend. Probably a day if you're a quick sewist or an experienced sewist. But for me, because I have other stuff to do, other things to do, I tend to just use the time that I have, and that ended up taking, I think, about 3 days. So I really like the results of this project, and I'm excited to show it. And I will definitely be using this pattern again. And I actually would love to try out using the tapestry fabric that I purchased with other corset designs, other, maybe lace up, more traditional style corsets, and see how that turns out. Because it's definitely more of a modern corset top style rather than like a typical corset. And I've made a set of stays before, so I have used thrifted tapestry fabric or tablecloth to make outerwear, like accessories in a way. And so it always has turned out really well for me. And so I'm kind of excited that I got so much of this one fabric. It was like $2 and like 37 cents for, I think it was a yard and 5/8 of the tapestry fabric. And I almost walked away and didn't purchase it. I was like, I don't need more fabric. And I just kept thinking about it. And so I turned around before I left because I hadn't found anything else that I liked. I was like, $2 and 30 cents or whatever I said, is worth it. And, then I kind of was thinking about how this project could come about because I had been looking for a fabric to use to make a cute corset top for autumn and winter. And honestly, I think the coloring that I chose in this bodice style could actually be worn all year round. So I think the only time it will be maybe a little too dark might be spring, but I break all sorts of fashion rules. So I really enjoy it, and hopefully you guys have fun watching me struggle, succeed, and make a few weird faces. And of course, there's an occasional cat. So hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so has anyone else gotten like just this idea stuck in their head and they have to figure it out? Well, I kind of happened with this corset top. I had been wanting something like it and I just wasn't finding it online. And so I went thrift shopping and I came across this like tapestry fabric, and it's really cool. It's got like some textured corduroy type on the front. And so I'm just pinning my pattern pieces along that vertical like cording detail because I think it would look really nice in the like corset pattern I'm using. And I'm just pinning these pattern pieces on. This is going to be the first set of pattern pieces. And I will go ahead and do this one more time with the outer layers, and then also do the same amount for the lining when I figure out what I would like to use. Here's a nice little surprise of my cat Pippin, named after the Lord of the Rings character. He is a menace. Anytime I try to sew, you will see him many times. Oop, there he is again. Okay, so now I've cut out all of the outside fabric. I'm folding that up and getting it ready to go back into my fabric cabinet. And then I'll try and find a lining color. This first piece of fabric that I'm pulling out is a brown linen that I had left over from the summer project, but I didn't love it with the gold. It just wasn't the right tone. So I kept looking and I found this yellow fabric that my grandma gave me. She knows that yellow is my favorite color. And so when I was home, she was like, hey, you might be able to use this. So I decided to go ahead and use yellow fabric for the lining. I thought it could be a nice contrast with the dark green and kind of pull out those gold accent details. But I could definitely tell it needed to be ironed. Now I'm just pinning and getting the lining pieces together, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the exact same thing I did for the bodice and get that all cut out and ready to go. Now I'm just attaching the side front to the main front with pins so that I can get ready to sew it on the sewing machine behind me. Okay, so now I have the side panels attached to the front. And the reason why I like to wait to do this is because when I match up the center front lines, then I can make sure that the rest of the bodice matches up because I'm still learning how to be precise with my sewing and cutting out pattern pieces. So I find this tends to make a cleaner front for me, and I can make sure that the sleeves are lined up. And it kind of acts as like a checkpoint to make sure that I didn't mess anything up or that my two sides are pretty consistent. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew through the center front bodice. And there we go. Look how cute. So we still have the sides and the back, and then this is going to be laced up like a corset in the back. So I'm hoping it'll turn out well. And essentially everything I'm doing with the outer layer, I'm going to have to do with the lining layer as well. But little fit check. Okay, now because this is like a tapestry fabric, it's really prone to like fraying and shedding. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and serge the edges. So that way, when I insert the boning, I can just lay it flat and do a couple top stitches down the bust line. Now that I have serged the edges, I'm going to take, I think these are embroidery needles. I think it came as a set. I'm just going to take one of these that has a larger, like, eyelet, not too large, to thread in the edges to secure them. I'm sure there's better ways of doing this, but this is what I found when I looked it up on Google of how to finish your serging, is to leave tails and then wind them in, weave them in. So that's what I've been doing. My cat Pip literally just came running down the stairs as though there was a fire. So that's exciting. If you hear howling in the background, it's probably him. Nope. You will now see me struggle immensely with trying to weave these ends in. Luckily, my struggles didn't last that long, and I ended up succeeding in the end. Testing heat on a scrap piece of fabric before I actually do it on my fabric piece, because this is a thrifted fabric, and so I don't want to burn it or melt it if it is like a polyester or something like that, synthetic. So I'm using a test scrap with my iron. I have it set on 4, which is for cotton blends, and it's just above polyester and rayon. I feel like that's going to be my safest bet, where it's enough heat that it'll actually fold the tapestry fabric, but it won't melt it. And it seems to be working pretty okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that using my little bust pillow and go from there. I am now adding the boning channels in the bust line. I'm using a pre-sewn, pre-cut boning channel. I just find this is a bit easier than making my own, especially in an instance like this where it doesn't matter too much and the zip ties fit right in. I ended up adding boning on most of the sides, and I left the middle without boning. Now I'm cutting the zip ties, and I like to round the edges so that they don't poke me, and I just kind of slide them on in to make sure that they fit in the channel exactly how I want them to, and leave enough room for the seam allowance on the outside for when I attach the outside layer to the lining later. Okay, so I have done the exact same thing that I did for the outside pieces with the lining pieces, except I didn't add the boning. I'm not serging the edges. One, because I think my serger broke. So I need to take that in for repair. And two, it's going to be on the inside, so it should be somewhat protected. I could zigzag stitch the edges, but I'm just feeling a little lazy, so I'm not going to do that. So I think the next step is to stitch along the outside neckline all the way around and through here, and then turn it inside out. Oops. I wasn't supposed to do that part. Here's the cap. But where's the actual seam ripper is the good question. Haha. On the floor, where it ought to be. In case you were wondering. So I ordered some frames off of Facebook Marketplace. They got here today, which is exciting. They're antique frames, and I thought I was getting a good deal on them. And when they got here, the lady did not have in her description measurements, and the photograph would suggest that they are normal size frames that you would put normal size pictures in. They are miniature, most of them smaller than the size of my palm. So I was really excited. I was like, oh, I'll get my, gallery wall started. And I mean, I'm still going to use them. I'm still going to hang them on the wall. They're just going to be for smaller prints. And it might have to really finagle getting the prints to look good at that scale. So that's my fail of the day. Minus, obviously, having to seam rip this entire little stitch line here because I'm not paying attention. But is it really sewing if you don't have to seam rip at least once for each process, each part of the process? I don't think so. That's why my seam ripper apparently lives on the floor, because I just am throwing it around from using it too much. So, all right, let's try this one more time. All right, the outside edge has been done. Now to do the inside. Now for every sewist's favorite task, ironing, or pressing the seams technically. And this is, like I said, tapestry fabric is always just a pleasure to work with. It really likes to bubble up. Not bubble up, but hold its shape, which is exactly why I like it for something like this. Like a project like this that needs structure. But boy, is it a pain. So I've actually turned up the heat higher than I had it yesterday. Now it's in between 4 and 5. I think it actually is working a little bit better at actually pressing those seams. One of my good friends, her motto when it comes to creating something is the 6-foot rule. And I love to live by it. And that is if it looks good from 6 feet away, that's a win. That is a successful project. Someone's like, wow, that's really cool. And they don't notice anything until they get up close and personal. Successful project. I think that's good for people that can't dedicate a lot of time to something like sewing or crafting. And so it's not like something that they can really grow in at the same capacity as someone who, dedicates most of their free time to it. So as someone who falls into that category, I find it really reassuring. And, obviously I'm learning a lot as I go, figuring out how to use my serger and breaking it at the same time. But there's a lot of things that you start to put together after sewing for a while. So it's starting to come together now. So I think the next step is to attach these side panels to the back. Okay, so I've sewn in the side panels to the back. So it's got a nice loop now. It's looking very close to being finished. But since I'm doing the grommets in the back, I want to add a strip of fusible interfacing here to give it just a little bit extra protection. Okay, so I did the first side. You can see the boning channel. I put a bone in there, and then just the side of this interfacing is sewn in, kind of just tacked in. And then once we put the bias tape and do the edges, it'll essentially come together. I might run one here. If I had thought about this before, I would have put the interfacing on before I attached the side seams so that this was actually in place. So this might just get tacked on, or I might just do a top stitch here just to secure that. So now that I have this on this side, I'm going to go ahead and do this on the other side in the exact same way. Okay, so I have finished sewing the outside hem and have tacked the lining down and have it ready to hand sew. Here I am. I'm sewing in my living room next to our Christmas tree, which is our first real tree since moving out of our home state. And that's really cool, being a forestry major and having multiple degrees in forestry. Obviously having a real tree is quite nice. And I'm here just sitting there talking with my mom on FaceTime. She's showing me a bunch of fun Christmas decorations she's finding when she's out and about. Alrighty, and so I have the entire bodice finished except for the sides, and I just need to add bias tape to those ends. So I have it essentially finished at this point. So I have all of the lining tacked down on the inside, and then the bias edge of the back put in place. So now it's time to use the little grommet tool here, or eyelet tool, to put in some brass grommets. I actually just got these from Ace Hardware around the corner because I did not have any, and the closest Joann's is 20 minutes, and that wasn't going to happen at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, right in rush hour traffic. I actually used these before with my some of my other projects, so I know that these work. So now I just have to figure out spacing. And then I usually use a seam ripper to open up the hole, the initial hole. And then I will put the grommet in and clamp it down. So that way the fabric is encased in the metal, which usually works pretty well, but we'll see if it works for this project. I haven't used fabric like this in a little while, so it'll be interesting to see how well it accepts grommets or eyelets. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.